The University Grants Commission last week unveiled revised draft guidelines for the appointment of faculty members and vice chancellors, which are going to replace, if adopted, the 2018 present guidelines. The UGC has proposed several changes in the recruitment and promotion process from the existing one. Today, we are joined by two distinguished academics who are both the former vice chancellors of the Delhi University to discuss the same in detail. Welcome to the print, Professor Dinesh Singh and Professor Deepak Pental. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'll start from Professor Dinesh Singh. Sir, I would like to ask you what, according to you, is the biggest takeaway from these draft guidelines? And if you can summarize in like two big pros and cons, and how do you view these draft norms?
Well, the takeaway from here, if you ask me, is one, of course, I am convinced that these guidelines have been issued with the best of intentions. Let's not be confused about that. But the concern is whether the intentions will match the outcomes. So the first takeaway is I wish they weren't full of so many bits and pieces, instructions, and dodges and this and that. It's terribly confusing. It takes some effort. I'm sure Professor Pental feels the same way, and much of what I'm going to say is really something that I honed when I was his subordinate, as when he was vice chancellor. We had many discussions on these issues. This second thing, again, it comes at a larger level, a sort of matter of policy and principle. It's probably not the best of things for a central regulatory body to issue guidelines for universities to learn how to appoint faculty. Those are the things that you can do this with the best of intentions, and I know that their intentions are quite honest. But the danger lies in how this will affect the autonomy, the freedom, the innovation processes of an institution. So those are the things that concern me at this point.
Professor Pental, how do you see this proposal of opening doors for vice chancellorship for industry experts? And what, according to you, are the key takeaways from these guidelines, if you can tell us?
What concerns me is right from the very beginning whether these are, you see, these can be taken as the minimal what is required. Uh, there may be universities who would like to see more than 10 publications for a professor. So they are probably trying to define the minimal. But the
Yeah.
point is that uh, much will depend upon the intentions. You can make all sets of rules, but do you intend to take your university to be in the global ranking? Do you want to take your university to a much higher level than what it is today? Uh, I mean, if such intentions are not there, these things become sort of routine affair. You every 3 years you have assistant professor going to the next grade, interview them, call one or two experts. You have 5 publications or 5 in the uh, write-ups in a book. What kind of book it is? Who is publishing it? I mean, the quality consideration is not there, and the quality is very difficult to put down on a piece of paper. Uh, are you interested in people having published in high impact journals? Are you interested in supporting some area in the department which is where you were very good, but you have lost out now? So, Professor Dinesh Singh is right. You can have best of intentions, but implementing them at individual university level, uh, there may be some virtue in giving university some free hand in where the administration wants to take the university. Uh, and uh, one area which concerns me a lot is if you have good ambience for research, your level at which you will promote will be much higher than for a college or for a university where hardly any research is going on. So you can manipulate to only some extent sitting at the center. Much will depend upon where you want to take the university to.
Yeah, sir, but the UGC has also proposed in these guidelines like to change some eligibility criterias both at the assistant professorship and at the vice chancellorship. So that way, what according to you these proposed guidelines will take our education system? Because right now for assistant professorship also, like for some categories net will not be required, and even like students with 4 year undergraduate program who will get PhD admissions after that will be eligible to become a professor, assistant professor.
First of all, I don't understand why, if you look at assistant professor, a UG degree with at least 75% marks. Now at UG level, you are seeking 75% marks, not a first division or anything, something like that. 75% marks. And at the PG level, only 55% marks. So what is it this based on? There's no clarity. Is the percentage the percentage of the students at UG level much higher than what it is at the PG level? And so that's one part which is not clear to me. This 75%, 55% marks, and of course the test. Some it will not apply. Whether it will apply later on or not, I don't know. Or they can continue with this particular proposal that if you have 75% marks at a PG level, at 55 at PG level and 75 at undergraduate level, you are eligible. So
Yeah,
I don't understand what is this based on. Is there
yeah, this
some
seven,
empirical, evidence for fixing it at this level?
yeah, I think this 75% here is because, sir, after that only you will be eligible to get direct admission in a PhD after a 4 year undergraduate program. That's why it has written here. But yes,
Oh,
you have raised, yeah.
then we should say this applies only to those who are directly going for PhD.
Sir, if you can tell something about what is your view on these revised eligibility criteria for both assistant professorship and vice chancellorship as well.
If I remember correctly, and Professor Pental can sort of attest to that, in the early years, when it came to the selection of a vice chancellor, there was really no qualification required. I think most universities in their acts had a statement that said person of eminence. And he'll bear me out. I remember Baroda University had its first woman vice chancellor. In fact, she was the first woman vice chancellor in the world. She did not even have a master's degree, but she was a very wise lady, Hansa Mehta. She had been a member of the Constituent Assembly, had been a freedom fighter, and was essentially a very accomplished lady, and was the first woman vice chancellor in the world at SNDT University, from where Sardar Patel had her brought over to Baroda as vice chancellor. She was the first vice chancellor. She was there for 9 years. And she, to my mind, she's one of the best vice chancellors India has had. And she had no qualification, let alone a PhD. As far as I know, she didn't even have a master's. So that part is okay. You
Okay.
know, you prescribe too much, then you lock yourself in, you create too many, restrictions, and then your field is limited. To that extent, I'm okay with it. But the kind of game our regulatory bodies keep playing, I mean, first they had this freedom to appoint person of eminence, then they began to bring in some rules, then they brought in that you had to be a professor for 10 years. Let me again, Professor Pentel will again bear me out. Princeton University became Princeton University that we know today in the 60s. And do you know how that happened? There was an assistant professor who was on contract, not even a regular permanent employee. And the board of trustees saw wisdom in the fact that if he becomes president, he will do something. He was in his
Oh,
30s, Robert Gohin, and he remained president for more than 20 years. And he transformed Princeton. And so all these criteria that you have to be 10 years, now they've removed that. So I
yeah.
suppose someone like Gohin, I have no idea. I can't remember the regulations for the vice chancellor. Do they require just a person of eminence or is there anything else?
There is an option for 10 years of experience as well as a professor, and there is an or also, either this or that, or probably having an experience from industry or
Okay,
public
so that's the
service.
other, I have looked at the history of Harvard. Let me just
Hmm.
tell you again, all these things are coming from my discussions with Professor Pental and many, many, many over many years. Look, Harvard was not really getting anywhere as long as the local government had control over it. They put in lots of regulations. Harvard began to become the Harvard that we know when the government withdrew and gave up all its regulations. And then Harvard began to govern itself. And then they brought in a good academic as president who also ruled for a long, who was president for a long time. And that transformed Harvard. But we keep talking all the time that we need to be at a global level. We should be like Harvard, Cambridge, so on and so forth. But I have, in my knowledge, and I hope Professor Pentel will agree with me, in my knowledge, I don't know any corporate leader who's headed a university and brought it up to speed and done great things with it. You have to have some idea of the world of academics, the way things work. Of course you must be aware of what's happening around you, but I don't know of a single institution till date where they bring in people from industry to head a university just out off the shelf. That's not happening. So look, I mean, I as I said, I'm sure they put in a lot of effort, but I'm not very sure the outcomes will be good.
Professor Pentel, would you like to add anything on this? The vice
Well,
chancellorship?
Professor Dinesh Singh has a much better sense of history and some of these historical facts. But from common sense, I can tell you that if you make a good academic with reasonable record in research, uh, then that person will have to live up to his or her reputation and try to do something good for the university. If you bring in a person, now let's say you bring somebody from industry, somebody who has been GM or CEO or whatever you want to call, and the person wants to come to a university and transform it, and you believe that this person will be able to do something. Why not? The person has run industry, the person must have an engineering degree or management degree, or so it will be okay. In fact, sometimes I shouldn't say sometimes, we require better management, because within university there's a files move on for weeks and weeks on so many people signing on it. Somebody has got a project, I'm signing, he's signing, she is signing. So this depends on the vision of the person. So if the person can be an eminent person is okay. I don't have any issue with that. But the age of 70 years, now
Yeah.
this is something which is creating a little bit of havoc with our research teaching ambience. In university, vice chancellor can go up to 70, but a professor, no matter how distinguished scientist that person is, can only go till 65.
65.
Now,
Yeah.
why this duality? And in research institutes like CSIR and DBT and so on, you retire at 60. So
Yeah.
there seems to be, I think this is something which the government should look very carefully at, because there's no point in having people at 60 before they become 60 in the research institutes try to jump to the university. uh, then if you try to muscle your way into getting vice chancellorship, you can go up to 70. So there should be a retirement age of 65 for people who are doing research and teaching throughout the country.
Yeah.
That something similar we can make. We can leave aside private universities if you want to, but the public funded universities should have something like 65 age limit, and then uh, in fact a professor who is doing full-time research can get a few more years if they have to complete some very vital work, but not in administration. As the Supreme Court judges go at 65, for example.
Yeah.
So I think that is something which can be looked at by, if not by these people, this time, next time, maybe they should look at it this time also. But uh,
Hmm.
a person of eminence with some vision is what is required, and who likes to decentralize rather than centralize powers within himself or herself as the vice chancellor.
So the UGC guidelines also laid down the process of hiring vice chancellor and explicitly said that the committee, the search cum selection committee, will be constituted by the chancellor, which is vice president of India for central universities and governors for state universities. So a lot of states are raising concern over it. So I would like to know opinions of both of you on this also, because as of now in 2018 guidelines it was not written clearly that who will constitute this committee. So Professor Dinesh, will you speak?
Well, at the University of Delhi, and the system seems to have worked reasonably well so far.
Hmm.
Uh, Both Professor Pental and I came in through that system. There used to be a three-member search committee. Two of those members would be nominated by the university's executive council. Now, the executive council of the university has nominees of the president of India, the vice president of India, and other
Yeah.
eminent worthies, and includes senior faculty. And the
Yeah.
system seems to have worked reasonably well. It
Hmm.
allows the university also to have a say and reflects the concerns and needs of the university. If you see, one of the problems that I keep finding in India, we are forever centralizing everything. We need, as I said, Harvard began to become the Harvard that we know when the government gave up control. It moved away. And all the universities that I know, including all those so called public universities in the United States, have begun to do well from the time when local governments, state governments sort of move away and allow local things to play. That's not happening at our institutions, at least the ones that are publicly funded. There's too much of central control. Let me just I'll illustrate this. More than 100 years ago, Srinivas Ramanujan was at Madras University trying to clear the intermediate exam, and he failed. And they stripped him of his scholarship, stripped him of the roles of the university. At the same time, and by now in India, even though they didn't fully understand his mathematics, there were enough people to know that there is something extraordinary about him. Yet they did nothing. And exactly at the same time, when G.H. Hardy at Cambridge found out about Ramanujan through that one letter he wrote, in no time was Ramanujan made a fellow of Trinity College, where Newton was. And fellow is the highest level. He had no degree, not even an intermediate degree. And Cambridge University, on the basis of the work he had done in India, much of which had not even been published,
Yeah.
awarded him a full-fledged PhD. He didn't have to do anything. They just gave him a regular, it's not an honorary doctorate, a PhD. And his own university today also will
Hmm.
not be able to do that. That
Hmm.
is where we have to move away a little bit from too many centrally driven directives. I wish our policymakers would take this into account when they decide on such matters.
Professor Pental, would you like to add something?
In fact, this should be. I agree with what Professor Dinesh Singh is saying. We should decentralize these things, and then in when we rate universities, we should see what kind of faculty have they hired. Is they have they hired geniuses? Have they hired people with who are publishing in high impact factor journals? How many publications they have? That kind of criteria we don't have. NAC gives A plus, A triple plus. Do we give A triple plus universities any extra grant that they move further over, beyond a point? So there are too many things that universities can do, but I do agree it should be decentralized and there should be no political interference. The idea should be to excel in academics, in research, in teaching. Now, I also see that in the criteria which they've said, 4 out of these 7 conditions should be met. 7 or 9 the points have been given. In innovative teaching contribution. Now, how do
Yeah.
you find out whether somebody has been innovative? Here, something is wrong with the faculty, nothing wrong with UGC. Anytime we say that student evaluation of the teachers should be there and an honest appraisal should be made at the end of the academic year, uh, it's not done. People revolt against that very badly. So that's the weakness or lack of self confidence in our teachers also. Uh, then you say research or teaching lab development. Now, research is so rudimentary in our colleges. Even universities, state universities are struggling. Central universities are okay, but the way grants are given these days, where the money returns to the government on a given day, it upsets the projects very badly. So, how do you find out somebody got an opportunity to do research in some college? There is no laboratory even. Then they say consultancy sponsored research funding as a principal
Yeah.
investigator. In fact, for in the university, teaching and your research are the only 2 criteria which should matter. Rest is all, uh, added add-ons. Teaching contributions in Indian languages, teaching,
Indian knowledge
learning, and
system is also there.
research in
Yeah.
Indian knowledge system. No, you should fund Indian knowledge system, research in Indian knowledge system, and then they should write something which is very brilliant and outstanding, uh, publish in some good journal, and then it's okay. But if
Yeah.
you are just doing some project on so-called Indian knowledge, then you are biased and you want to push up some type of certain type of faculty. So I think this area needs to be uh, clarified. Only
Clarity.
teaching and your time you spend with students, whether you inspire them, whether you bring something new to the classroom, how much enthusiasm you are able to sort of inculcate in your students, that is what should matter. And research, of course, is very important component. I feel very sad when I see the universities being stagnant in terms of the quality of research. At best, we can say they are stagnating, if not going down. So these 2 criteria, rest are all. Uh,
For
maybe you can have a
promotion.
third. Uh,
Yeah. Thank you so much for raising this topic, sir. I will also discuss this with Dr. Professor Dinesh Singh also. Sir, these are the criterias which should be looked by the committee which will be promoting and appointing assistant professor and promoting them to associate and professor level. These which Professor Pental has highlighted just now, and faculty members from various universities have raised concern over it. Like they include all these things like how many online courses you have developed, how many funded research you have got, and how much you have contributed in terms of IKS, and if you are teaching in Indian languages. Do you think these criteria should be looked upon while evaluating teachers?
Look, I'll tell you something. One of the most chauvinistic of cultures has been the French culture, where they're very possessive about their language. And I'll give you two personal instances. One, I happened to know one of France's leading mathematicians of the 20th century. He was also president of the French Academy of Sciences. He was like a father figure for me, and much of my work has been inspired by what he's done. Jean-Pierre Khan. And I remember one of my last conversations with him. He had told me that, when he started out as a mathematician, he knew only French. But he realized over time, and sooner rather than later, that he'd better be good at English. And then, by the time I got to know Professor Khan, he was extremely adept at English, and most of his research from about 1955 onwards. So he was in his 20s in 1955. And about around the age of 26, 27 onwards, most of his research has been in the English language. And he told me it was imperative, even though he was so fond of his own language, that it was important to be. So I hope in this desire to promote, and I'm very much, very fond of languages, and I'm reasonably good at 3 or 4 Indian languages. Gujarati, I know a smattering of Marathi, I know Hindi, I know Bhojpuri, and I also studied German for 2 years, and I'm reasonable. There's nothing special, and I've liked all that. But you better be good at the English language, because that's where, at the global level, all countries, Japan included, are publishing their research. And if you want to learn from them and measure up to their standards, better make sure that you don't lose sight of that. That's very important. The other thing, when it comes to this business of autonomy, I know this for a fact. My father became Vice Chancellor of Allahabad University, from where he had studied before he went abroad to take his doctorate at Paris. And that was during British rule when he studied there. And then just after independence, he went abroad. And he came back. Many years later, he went back there as Vice Chancellor. And he told me that under the British, Allahabad University had far more autonomy than it did under the state government. Do you see that somewhere India has not realized this? So let me tell you, my father himself was unaware. He had not applied for a job yet when he'd come back. And the Vice Chancellor of Allahabad University just appointed him over the counter. He had the power. But he was himself, the Vice Chancellor at that time, Professor Amarnath Jha, was a distinguished professor of English literature, a man of great standing. And he did that. My father got to know when he was appointed that he had been appointed. He hadn't even applied. Do Vice Chancellors have that power now? We don't. None of these regulations are giving the Vice Chancellor that kind of power. That's where we need to think carefully if you want to measure up to global standards. It's something. Even Hansa Mehta invited my father when he hadn't been appointed, hadn't applied. She appointed him professor straight away. He was in his 30s, and she brought him to Baroda. And she had so much freedom that she brought people in every discipline at a high level. So much so that Venkat Ramakrishnan, the Nobel laureate, took his first degree from Baroda in the life sciences, and he said his work is mathematical, and the mathematical training he had at Baroda University stood him in good stead for the Nobel Prize. Ask yourself this question: how many vice chancellors exist today that we appoint? We're not. We're just looking for 10 years professorship. कितने publications है? अरे उसका vision, उसका contribution, eminent लोग ही ना जानेंगे तो search committee भी eminent होनी चाहिए. Chancellors mostly are governors, and we know, with the greatest of respect, governors aren't always the most suited to appoint search committees. थोड़ा university को आजादी देंगे, सांस लेने की फुर्सत देंगे तो थोड़ा बेहतर होगा. ऑक्सीजन ज्यादा आएगी तो सिस्टम भी अच्छा चलेगा.
So you mean to say, sir, that autonomy should be with individual universities, right?
Yes.
How they want to appoint their vice chancellors, how they want to appoint their assistant professors, and how they want to promote them.
फरीहा जी, आप चेक कर लीजिए, हार्वर्ड और एमआईटी, प्रोफेसर पेंटल दोनों जगह गए हैं, आमने सामने हैं. हार्वर्ड अपने तरीके से चलता है, एमआईटी अपने तरीके से चलता है. दोनों में कोई झगड़ा नहीं है, कोई फसाद नहीं है, हेल्दी कंपटीशन है. पर वो अपने, मैंने देखा कि मैथमेटिक्स वो फर्स्ट डिग्री जो पढ़ाते हैं हार्वर्ड में इज वेरी डिफरेंट फ्रॉम द वे एमआईटी टीचेस. मगर दोनों अच्छा कर रहे हैं, दोनों को फ्रीडम मिली हुई है. आप एक ही मापदंड लगा देंगे तो एक चीज समझ लीजिए, फिर इनब्रीडिंग हो जाएगी, क्रॉस फर्टिलाइजेशन ऑफ आइडियाज नहीं होगी. हार्वर्ड के सेमिनार्स में एमआईटी वाले जाते हैं, एमआईटी के डिस्कशंस में हार्वर्ड वाले जाते हैं। क्रॉस ब्रीडिंग उनकी आइडिया नहीं होती, इनकी भी नहीं होती। अब क्या होगा, हर यूनिवर्सिटी एक ही तरीके से चलेगी तो बहुत दिक्कत आएगी।
सर एक और चीज है यहाँ पे, फॉर द फील्ड्स लाइक योगा, म्यूजिक, आर्ट, डांस, फॉर ऑल दीज थिंग्स, if now the university grants commissioner has proposed that the universities can hire people who have achieved certain like some recognition at the state level or at maybe national level. They don't need PhDs or net for that. So how do you see that? Do you think that this will be good? Professor Pental, would you like to say
There is
something about it?
always the possibility of taking such people as adjunct faculty. You
Yeah.
can take them as adjunct professors, but I think in these areas it would be good if in music there are some top gurus who have their own disciples who do so well, can come to the universities also and teach. I think in some of the arts area, uh, the degrees don't matter so much as is your skill in and your excellence that you have achieved in that, because that would inspire the student. So I think that is a that seems like a good point.
Yeah, that's a I agree with Professor Pentel. Or Professor Pentel always liked to push the boundaries when he was vice chancellor. So he always played around with this and got eminent people from the world to come to the university. I learned much from him on that count. And also, at the risk of repeating myself, हंसा मेहता ने फैकल्टी ऑफ म्यूजिक एंड फाइन आर्ट्स मेड इट वन ऑफ द बेस्ट इन इंडिया। और वहां जितने लोगों को अपॉइंट किया, किसी का रिसर्च पब्लिकेशन नहीं था, किसी के पास पीएचडी नहीं थी, कुछ नहीं था। हु वर द पीपल देयर? सम ऑफ इंडियाज ग्रेटेस्ट म्यूजिशियंस, पेंटर्स, स्कल्पटर्स, शंकर चौधरी, एनएस बेंद्रे, सुब्रमण्यम, ज्योति भट्ट, जितने भी ऊंचे नाम इंडिया के हुए सब वहीं पर थे। और किसी के पास मास्टर्स की भी डिग्री नहीं थी, वो प्रोफेसर थे सब। दे वर डीन्स, दे वर एवरीथिंग। That gave such good results. I think somewhere India must look at that. Our own practices from the past have been good, very good.
So proposal is welcoming. That means it should
Yeah, yeah.
be
It's I
implemented.
Professor Pentel ने तो जब नहीं था तब भी ये तो करते रहते थे, पुश करते थे।
Sir, also the guidelines institutionalize the professor of practice scheme now, and also have removed the cap of 10% from hiring contractual faculty. So how do you think this will impact the university system, Professor
I,
Pental?
I don't know that part, but I can tell you with the criteria that have been given for promotion, everybody will get promoted because there will be no issue. Everybody will manage 10 chapters in some or the other book. You know, at the end of the day, your intentions matter a lot. Whether you have inspiration as a country, as an institution, uh, as a local political body, where you want to take the country and the society. Uh, I think if that inspiration is not there, then all these rules will be met, and there, of course, the universities will use their own autonomy in what they recognize as a good journal. I mean, the UGC is not going to come into every university and check which 10 publishers published the 10 chapters. So, a lot has been left to the imagination of the university, but perhaps on the negative side rather than on the positive side. And I'll end by only saying that if you are not inspired to take things forward, if you don't want to march into the future with looking for a better future, more creative future, then you will just go on. You can make any set of rules.
Professor Dinesh Singh, I would like to know your opinion on this removal of 10% cap from contractual teachers hiring, and with that also your concluding remarks on the guidelines.
Again, फरीहा जी, मेरी गुजारिश है कि इतना माइक्रो मैनेज ना करें तो बेहतर है। मैं मानता हूं इरादे नेक है, वो बुरा नहीं चाहते हैं, और दे आर आल्सो बीइंग compelled to do all this because there is a bit of a free for all in many of our publicly funded universities across the land. We are in some danger. काफी हालात खराब हैं, पर मैं उसका नुस्खा एक ही नुस्खा है। आप select a good vice chancellor, find a good person, give him some freedom, and you watch, give him a little time, he or she will produce the results. That's all I really need to say. ये जितना हम ये स्ट्रेट जैकेटिंग करेंगे, ये आगे चल के काउंटर प्रोडक्टिव हो जाएगा। एंड मैं निंदा नहीं कर रहा, I'm not criticizing.
Yeah.
I know these have been done with good intentions, काफी सोच विचार के किया है, मगर मैंने वर्ल्ड में कहीं भी इसको नहीं देखा। इंग्लैंड में भी the universities besides Cambridge, Oxford, Imperial, other universities began to flourish when they abolished the UGC there. मैं नहीं कह रहा हूं यहाँ abolish कीजिए, please don't get me wrong, but when they realized कि इसके कंट्रोल से नुकसान हो रहा है, तो उन्होंने फ्रीडम दे दी। ये बहुत जरूरी है, हम भी थोड़ा समझें तो बेहतर है।
Professor Pental, your concluding remarks on the draft guidelines?
Well, I think I have very similar views to what Professor Dinesh Singh is saying. There should be some inspiration coming from somewhere. How much money we are putting into R&D, how much we are giving freedom to the faculty to purchase what they require for their research. Are we over bureaucratic? We are over bureaucratic. And I think the trust levels are low. That's why we have to make these rules, because we don't trust that somebody will do what is justified and somebody will be inspired only for the excellence of the university and not his or her own future. But uh, I think at the end of the day, uh, micromanagement is not possible from the center. If the inspiration is not within the institution, it's very difficult to take it forward.
Thank you so much for both of you for joining us at The Print. It was a very insightful discussion on the UGC's draft guidelines, which are most likely to come in its final form in the next coming months. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much,
Pleasure.
Professor.
Pleasure.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
much, Professor Pental.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.